Part 1 Wind and Dust at Prickly Pear Landing. The stagecoach lurched to a stop with a groan of wood and leather, throwing May Callahan against the hard bench one final time. Through the dust-caked window, she glimpsed Thornbrush, a collection of weathered buildings huddled against the Wyoming wind like cattle in a storm. The year was 1889, and she'd traveled 3 weeks from Nebraska to reach this forgotten corner of creation. May gathered her worn carpetbag and stepped down, her boots hitting the packed earth with a soft thud. The October wind immediately tried to steal her bonnet, carrying with it the sharp scent of sagebrush and something else, the promise of early snow. She'd learned to read weather like scripture during the journey west, each gust a verse warning of hardship ahead. "Papers," a voice demanded before she'd taken 2 steps. Deputy Kellen Draper stood blocking her path, his badge catching the afternoon sun like an accusation. He was a narrow man with narrow eyes, the kind who'd found power in a piece of tin and wielded it like a club. Behind him, 2 other men lounged against the depot wall, trying to look casual and failing. "I beg your pardon," May kept her voice steady, though her pulse quickened. "All newcomers got to be checked. Opium smuggling's been a problem." His smile revealed tobacco-stained teeth. Especially with unaccompanied females, May knew a lie when she heard one. She'd buried both parents in Nebraska soil, victims of measles and poverty, but she hadn't survived the journey west by being naive. Still, she had little choice. She set down her bag and opened it. Draper's hands dove into her belongings like hungry crows, scattering her few possessions: 2 patched dresses, her mother's Bible, a small sewing kit, and the oilcloth packet she'd guarded more carefully than her own life. His fingers found it immediately. "What's this, then?" He unwrapped the protective layers, revealing yellowed papers covered in faded ink and official seals. "Personal documents," May said, ice creeping into her voice despite the heat. "Of no interest to the law." Draper's eyes scanned the pages, and his expression shifted from bored authority to sharp interest. "Water rights deed to Little Copper Creek. That's Cattlemen's League territory. It was my father's, Patrick Callahan. He filed it proper in '74 before the League established proper management of resources." Draper finished, folding the papers and sliding them into his vest. "I'll need to verify these with Judge Morrison. You can collect them at the courthouse in, say, 30 days. "Those are mine by law." May stepped forward, but the 2 men by the wall straightened, hands moving to their hips. "Everything's the League's by law, miss. Best you learn that quick." That's when Eli Hart rounded the corner, leading a string of 3 horses. He moved like a man who'd learned to be part of the landscape, unhurried but purposeful, dust-colored clothes blending with the street. May noticed his hands first, scarred and capable, then the way he assessed the situation in a single glance. "Problem, Draper." His voice carried the same weathered quality as the buildings around them. "No problem. Just explaining local ordinances to the lady." Eli's gray eyes moved from Draper to May, taking in her travel-worn dress and the scattered belongings. "Since when do ordinances include rifling through a woman's possibles?" "Since the League said so." Draper's hand drifted toward his pistol. "This ain't your concern." "Hart." "Maybe not." Eli tied his horses to the hitching post with deliberate calm. "But I need a cook for the ranch. If the lady's looking for work, that makes her my business." May understood the lifeline being thrown. "I am seeking employment. Yes." "Then we're done here." Eli began gathering her scattered belongings, his movements efficient but respectful. When he reached for her mother's Bible, he handled it like spun glass. Draper's laugh was ugly. "Hart's spur ain't gonna last the winter anyway. League's got plans for that water you've been stealing." "I use what I'm entitled to, same as my father did." "Your father's dead. Times change." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Eli's jaw tightened, but he continued packing May's bag. "Miss, if you're willing, I've got a wagon at Murphy's store. Room and board, plus $2 a week for cooking and keeping house. May nodded, not trusting her voice. She'd accepted charity before and hated the taste, but this felt different a trade. Work for shelter. She could hold her head up with that. As they walked away, Draper called after them. 30 days, miss, don't forget. Eli's ranch wagon was old but well-maintained, like everything else she'd noticed about him. He helped her up without comment on her shaking hands, then climbed aboard and clicked to the horses. They rolled out of thornbrush as the sun began its descent toward the mountains. Thank you, May said once the town fell behind them. Don't thank me yet. Ranch work ain't easy, especially with winter coming. Neither is traveling alone from Nebraska. She studied his profile, weathered but not old, maybe 30-some years. A scar ran along his jawline, white against sun-dark skin. What did he take? Eli's hands tightened on the reins. Saw him pocket papers. What kind? Water deed. Little Copper Creek. My father filed it in '74. The wagon hit a rut, jostling them both. When Eli spoke again, his voice carried a new note. That creek feeds my land. Has since my father's time. I'm not here to take anything from anyone, May said quickly. I thought maybe I could lease the rights, earn enough to start fresh somewhere. The League doesn't believe in sharing water, or anything else. They topped a rise, and Eli pointed to a cluster of buildings in the distance. That's Hart Spur. It ain't much, but it's honest. The ranch looked exactly as May had pictured a main house of logs and determination, a barn that leaned slightly but stood firm, corrals sketched against the endless sky. Smoke rose from the chimney, and she felt an unexpected tightness in her throat. It looked like what home was supposed to be. A figure emerged from the barn as they approached a boy of maybe 14, all knees and elbows, with the kind of mixed features that made townspeople whisper. He jogged over, taking in May with curious eyes. Ridge, this is Miss Callahan. She'll be cooking for us. Miss, this is Ridge. He helps with the horses. Ma'am. The boy touched his hat brim, a gesture both polite and wary. Pleased to meet you. Ridge. May smiled, and some of his wariness eased. Inside, the house was sparse but clean. Eli showed her the kitchen, a good stove, seasoned cast-iron pans, shelves stocked with basic supplies. Her room was off the kitchen, small but private, with a narrow bed and a window facing the mountains. I'll leave you to settle, Eli said. Supper's usually at sundown. Nothing fancy needed, we're used to bachelor cooking. After he left, May sat on the bed and let the shaking finally take her. The water deed was gone, her only inheritance, her only hope of independence. But she was alive, had work, had shelter. Tomorrow she'd figure out how to get the papers back. Tonight, she'd cook a meal that would prove her worth. The kitchen welcomed her like an old friend. She found salt pork, beans that had been soaking, cornmeal and preserved peaches. Simple fare, but she could make it sing. As she worked, the familiar rhythm of cooking steadied her nerves. This she could control. This she understood. When Eli and Ridge came in at sundown, the kitchen smelled of home beans rich with pork fat and molasses, cornbread golden from the oven, peaches stewed with precious sugar and cinnamon. Ridge's eyes went wide. Miss, this smells like Sunday. Every meal should feed more than just the body, May said, setting plates before them. They ate in appreciative silence at first. Then Eli spoke. The League's been pressuring small ranchers for 2 years, buying out some, forcing out others. They want to consolidate water rights, control the whole valley. Is that legal? Legal's whatever Judge Morrison says it is, and Morrison says what Silas Crowley tells him to. Eli pushed beans around his plate. Your father, Patrick Callahan. I heard that name before. He filed that claim up at South Pass. Yes, he was heading to Oregon, but Mama took sick. They wintered here, and he fell in love with the land. Said it reminded him of Galway. Good man. Helped my father reset fence posts one spring. I was just a boy, but I remember. The connection, thin as spider's silk, hung between them. May felt less alone than she had in months. After supper, Ridge cleared the table while May washed dishes. Through the window, she watched Eli checking the horses, moving among them with unconscious grace. A good man, she thought, in a hard place, like all of them. Miss, Ridge appeared at her elbow. Town folks, they talk about Mr. Hart. I mean, say he brings trouble to those close to him. People say many things. Yes'm, but some things they say are true. The boy slipped away before she could respond. Later, in her narrow bed, May stared at the ceiling and made plans. The deed was gone, but not destroyed. Draper would keep it. Men like him hoarded power like dragons hoarded gold. She needed allies, leverage, something to trade. The widow Joe that Eli had mentioned at supper, who ran the boarding house, she might know things. And the water itself. Little Copper Creek, she needed to see it, understand why it mattered so much. A coyote called somewhere in the darkness, answered by another. The sound raised goosebumps on her arms. This land didn't forgive weakness or mistakes. But May had buried her parents, traveled alone through hostile territory, and survived. She'd learned the rules of this new battlefield. The wind picked up, rattling her window. It carried the scent of sage and snow, promise and threat combined. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. But tonight, she had a roof overhead and purpose in her hands. Just before sleep took her, she heard footsteps on the porch, Eli's measured tread as he made a final check of the grounds. A careful man, a guarded one. Ridge's warning echoed in her mind, but May pushed it aside. Everyone carried ghosts out here. The trick was not letting them steer the wagon. In town, Kellen Draper smoothed out the water deed on Judge Morrison's desk, smiling at the faded ink. The League would pay well for this, or better yet, he'd hold on to it. Let Crowley know he had it. Power was better than money, and this slip of paper was power indeed. The Callahan girl won't be a problem, he said to the empty office. And if Hart wants to play hero, well, heroes don't last long in Thornbrush. The wind howled agreement, or warning, depending on who was listening. # Part 2 Embers Under Ash. 3 weeks had passed since May arrived at Hart's Spur, and she'd fallen into the rhythm of ranch life like a hand into a well-worn glove. The pre-dawn darkness no longer startled her awake. Instead, she rose with purpose, stoking the stove's banked coals into life before Eli and Ridge stirred. This morning, she found Eli already at the kitchen table, studying a ledger by lamplight. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. Coffee, she offered, pouring without waiting for an answer. Obliged. He wrapped his hands around the mug like it might save him. Storm coming. Need to move the horses to the sheltered pasture. May had learned to read the weather signs the way the mountains disappeared behind a gray veil, how the wind shifted from west to north. I'll pack extra provisions. No need. We'll be back by... I'll pack them anyway. She'd also learned when to push back. Ridge is still growing. He needs proper meals. A ghost of a smile touched Eli's lips. Yes, ma'am. While she prepared biscuits and dried beef, May watched him through her lashes. 3 weeks of watching had taught her much, how he favored his left shoulder on cold mornings, an old injury that pride wouldn't let him acknowledge. The way his hands gentled around anything fragile, from horse harness to coffee cups. How he sometimes stared at nothing, caught in memories that carved lines around his eyes. That ledger won't balance itself by worrying, she said, sliding a plate before him. Leagues raised the freight rates again. Makes it harder to get supplies. He took a bite, and some tension eased from his shoulders. May had discovered the power of good food to soften hard truth. Might have to sell some breeding stock, or find another way. She thought of her water deed, locked away in Draper's office. 3 discreet inquiries in town had confirmed what she suspected. The deputy was keeping it for leverage. not processing. Ridge burst through the door, bringing cold air and energy. Horses are restless. Mr. Hart, that dun mare's pacing something fierce. Animals know. Eli pushed back from the table. Let's move them before the worst hits. After they left, May attacked her chores with focused determination. She mucked out the chicken coop, gathered eggs, and hauled water from the well. The physical work had hardened her soft city muscles, replacing weakness with capability. But it was the water pump that gave her pause. The mechanism was simple but badly worn. She'd watched Eli repair it twice already, each fix more temporary than the last. Water was everything here for drinking, cooking, cleaning, life itself, yet they were one breakdown from crisis. She examined the pump housing, noting how mineral deposits had corrupted the seal. In Nebraska, her father had taught her basic mechanics, believing a woman should be useful beyond the kitchen. Now she blessed his foresight. The tool shed yielded what she needed: files, oil, leather for new gaskets. May spread her skirts on the packed earth and went to work. 2 hours later, grease-stained but triumphant, she had the pump working smooth as cream. Well, I'll be damned. May started, nearly dropping the wrench. Widow Joe stood behind her, wearing men's trousers and a knowing grin. Pardon my language, Joe continued, not looking sorry at all. But it's not every day I see a lady in petticoats rebuilding machinery. Machinery doesn't care what you wear, long as you treat it right. May wiped her hands on a rag, studying her visitor. Josephine Tucker, Widow Joe, ran the boarding house in town and knew everyone's business without seeming to pry. She was somewhere past 40, with steel-gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. She'd arrived on one of her neighborly visits, which May had learned meant information gathering disguised as gossip. Eli, know you can do this. Haven't mentioned it. Smart girl. Joe settled on the porch steps, producing a flask from somewhere in her voluminous coat. Men like to feel needed, though that one needs less coddling than most. May joined her, accepting a sip of what turned out to be excellent whiskey. You knew his father? Samuel Hart was a good man, stubborn as a mountain and twice as solid. Eli's got the same backbone, but he's carrying more weight. Joe's eyes sharpened. You heard about Martha? Only that she died. 3 years back, rustlers hit the Grayson spread during spring roundup. Eli rode with the posse that went after them. Joe took another sip. Martha was at the Grayson place, helping with a birthing, wrong place, wrong time, caught in the crossfire when the shooting started. May's hands clenched in her lap. Not his fault. Course not. But guilt doesn't listen to logic. He'd asked her to marry him the week before. She was wearing his ring when she died. The wind gusted, rattling loose boards somewhere. May pulled her shawl tighter. Is that why people say he brings trouble? People say lots of things when they're scared. Easier to blame a man than admit life's just hard sometimes. Joe stood, brushing off her pants. Speaking of which, Draper's been asking about you in town, wanting to know your habits. Let him ask. That's the spirit. Joe paused at the porch edge. There's something else. I did some checking in the county records discreet, like your father's water claim. It's got peculiar wording. Mentions hereditary usage rights as established by prior inhabitants. May's pulse jumped. Meaning your PA was smart enough to acknowledge the Shoshone who used that water before any of us showed up. Makes the claim harder to break. Legally speaking. Hope flickered like a candle flame. Would a judge care? This judge, no. But federal courts might. If it came to that, keep that in mind. Joe winked and strode off, leaving May with much to consider. The storm hit that afternoon, driving snow horizontal across the yard. May kept coffee hot and stew bubbling, knowing Eli and Ridge would return frozen and famished. She also loaded Eli's Winchester and placed it by the door. Storms provided cover for more than just snow. They arrived at dusk, ice in their beards and exhaustion in their movements. May had hot water ready for washing, dry clothes warming by the stove. She served stew without chatter, letting heat and food work their magic. Lost 2 horses. Ridge finally said, "Just vanished in the white. They'll hole up somewhere." Eli replied, but May heard the doubt. Lost horses meant lost income, lost breeding potential. Another blow to the ledger's cruel mathematics. After supper, Ridge retreated to his lean-to room in the barn, preferring the company of horses to humans most nights. May understood the boy had Indian blood from his mother's side, enough to make town life uncomfortable, but not enough to claim tribal belonging. Hart's Spur was his refuge, too. She was darning socks by lamplight when Eli surprised her. "You fixed the pump." May kept her needle moving. It needed doing. That it did. He settled in the opposite chair. A rare occurrence, usually. He disappeared after supper to check stock or repair tack anything to avoid quiet moments that might invite conversation. "My mother could fix anything. Said machines were more honest than people." Wise woman. She was. He stared at the fire. "Would have liked you, I think." The compliment, simple as it was, warmed May more than the stove. They sat in companionable silence while she finished the sock. When she reached for another, Eli cleared his throat. "Been thinking, you know how to shoot." "No, Pa meant to teach me, but—" "You should learn. Basic safety out here." He stood abruptly, as if the decision made him restless. "Tomorrow, if the storm breaks." The next morning dawned crystalline. The world transformed into white curves and blue shadows. After breakfast, Eli led May behind the barn where bales of hay served as backstop. He produced a Colt .36, its weight surprising in her hands. "It's not about killing," he said, positioning her stance. "It's about having options when trouble comes calling." His hands covered hers on the grip, steady and warm. May forgot about the cold, acutely aware of his presence behind her solid, protective, but careful to maintain proper distance. Breathe in, hold, squeeze gentle on the exhale. His voice was low near her ear. "The gun wants to shoot straight. Don't fight it." The first shot went wide, the second closer. By the 6th, she hit the target clean. Natural eye. Eli stepped back, and May felt the loss of warmth. Practice every day, build consistency. What if I don't want to shoot at anything living? Then aim for their shoulder or leg. Stopping power without killing, but May— He met her eyes directly. Rare for him. "If it's your life or theirs, you choose yours. Promise me." "Yes." "I promise." They were walking back when horses appeared on the ridge, 6 riders moving with the purposeful pace of men on business. Eli's hand found his sidearm. "Inside," he said quietly. But May recognized the lead rider. "That's Draper." The deputy and his men rode into the yard like they owned it, scattering the chickens and setting the horses to nickering. Draper touched his hat brim with mock politeness. "Miss Callahan?" "Hart, just making rounds, checking on missing cattle." "No cattle here but our own," Eli said evenly. "Mind if we verify that had reports of rustling? Wouldn't want folks thinking Hart's Spur was harboring thieves." May felt Eli tense beside her. This was harassment disguised as law enforcement, and they all knew it. But refusing would only escalate matters. "Check all you want," Eli said. "You'll find nothing amiss." The men dismounted, making a show of peering into the barn, the sheds, even lifting tarps from the woodpile. One approached the chicken coop where May had just placed fresh straw. "Awful lot of feed for not many chickens," the man commented. "I trade eggs in town," May said crisply. "More chickens coming in spring." "If you're still here in spring," Draper interjected. "Lot of things can happen over winter. Accidents, fires, Indian troubles." "Is that a threat?" Eli's voice carried an edge now. "Just observation. The League protects its members, But independent operations, eh? Draper shrugged. Dangerous times. He sauntered closer to May, close enough that she smelled the tobacco and whiskey on him. 30 days is almost up. Miss, thought about my offer. Return those papers peaceful-like. The League might have work for an enterprising woman. The only thing I'll be returning is to collect my rightful property. His smile was all teeth. We'll see about that. After they left, churning the snow to mud, May found herself shaking with anger rather than fear. Eli's hand touched her elbow briefly. You did well. Didn't give them anything to use. They're going to keep pushing. Yes. He gazed after the disappearing riders. Question is how far we let them push before pushing back. That evening, while cleaning up after supper, May made her decision. At the kitchen table, she spread out paper and began writing. A letter to the territorial newspaper in Cheyenne. Another to Denver. Just fax water claims seized without due process. Intimidation of lawful citizens. Corruption of local officials. She didn't sign her name, but included enough detail to be credible. What are you doing? Ridge peered over her shoulder. Fighting back with the weapons I have. The boy grinned. My ma used to say the pen was mightier than the sword. Your ma sounds wise. She was. His smile faded. Before the sickness took her. May squeezed his shoulder, and he didn't pull away. Progress, built one small moment at a time. Later, banking the stove for the night, she found Eli on the porch despite the cold, staring at the stars. Can't sleep. Trying to figure their next move. He glanced at her. You should know. If you stay, it'll get worse. Draper was testing today. When that doesn't work. You trying to scare me off? Trying to be honest. You deserve that much. May pulled her shawl tight and stood beside him, looking up at the infinite sky. My PA used to say the stars looked different out west. Bigger, like they had more room to breathe. He was right. He also said nothing worth having comes easy. She turned to face him. I'm not running. Eli, not from Draper, not from the League, and not from this ranch. Something shifted in his expression, surprise, perhaps, or recognition. All right, then. They stood together in the cold starlight. Two people who'd learned to be alone, now testing what it meant to stand together. Inside the house, the stove ticked and settled. In the barn, horses shifted inside, and somewhere in the darkness, a coyote called not a threat this time, but a reminder that wildness still existed, despite all attempts to tame it. The storm had passed, leaving the world clean and sharp-edged. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. But tonight, there was this quiet understanding and shared resolve. May thought of her water deed, locked away in town. Joe's words echoed prior inhabitants, hereditary rights. Perhaps there was more than one way to fight this battle. Perhaps the answer lay not in confrontation, but in alliance with the land, with history, with those who'd been here long before cattle barons drew lines on maps. I should turn in, she said finally. May, her name on his lips stopped her. Thank you for staying. Thank you for giving me a place to stand. Inside, she added a postscript to her letter's asterisk. The American West was built on stories of courage and justice. Some of us still believe in those ideals. The question is whether the law does too. Tomorrow, she'd ride to town and mail them. The first shots in a different kind of war. #, Part 3, Dust Storm and Oaths. The sandstorm hit without warning on a Tuesday afternoon, turning the clear sky into a wall of brown fury. May had been tending the vegetable garden, her small victory against the harsh soil when the horizon disappeared. Get inside. Eli's shout barely carried over the rising wind. He was already running for the barn where the horses were screaming in panic. May grabbed the egg basket and stumbled toward the house, but through the swirling dust, she saw disaster unfolding. The corral gate, battered by the wind, had broken free. Horses were scattering into the storm, including the pregnant mares that represented next year's income. Without thinking, May dropped the basket and ran for the barn. She grabbed a bridle from the wall and whistled sharp the way Ridge had taught her. Through the chaos, the young paint mare she'd been working with responded, allowing May to slip the bridle over her head. "What are you doing?" Ridge appeared like a ghost in the brown haze. "Getting them back." May swung onto the mare bareback, her skirts bunching awkwardly. "Show me that box canyon you mentioned, the one with high walls." Ridge's eyes widened, but he didn't argue. He vaulted onto his own horse and pointed northwest. "Follow close. If we get separated—" "We won't." May dug her heels in, and they plunged into the storm. The world became a nightmare of stinging sand and howling wind. May's eyes streamed tears that turned to mud on her cheeks. She could barely see Ridge's horse ahead, but she could hear him whooping and calling in a mixture of English and Shoshone, sounds that carried on the wind. Then she saw them dark shapes moving through the storm, running blind with panic. The lead stallion, Caesar, was heading straight for the ravine that cut through the eastern pasture. A 50-foot drop waited in that direction. May veered hard, pushing her mare to intercept. She pulled Eli's training bandana from her pocket and whipped it in the air, creating a flash of movement that caught Caesar's attention. The stallion wheeled, and the herd followed, thundering past so close she felt the heat of their bodies. Ridge appeared on the other side, herding them left, together. They funneled the horses toward the box canyon, a natural corral with walls too high to jump. May's thighs burned from gripping the horse. Her hands were raw from the reins, but she held on. They got most of the herd into the canyon before the worst of the storm hit. May slid from her horse, legs trembling, and helped Ridge pile brush and rope across the narrow entrance. The horses milled inside, still nervous but safe from running blind. Two missing Ridge had to yell directly into her ear. "The bay and one yearling." "Better than losing them all." May's voice was hoarse from dust. They huddled against the canyon wall, horses and humans together, waiting for nature's fury to pass. An hour later, the wind died as suddenly as it had risen. The world looked alien familiar, landmarks buried or changed, fences down. The garden she'd worked so hard on completely gone, but the horses were safe. They led the herd back slowly, May walking because her legs wouldn't stop shaking. As they crested the last rise, she saw Eli standing by the ruined corral, his face a mask of dust and worry that transformed to relief when he spotted them. 22 head accounted for, Ridge called out cheerfully. Miss May rode like a Shoshone warrior. "Like a fool, you mean," Eli said, but his eyes held something that made May's heart skip. "Could have been killed." "So could the horses. They're your livelihood. Horses can be replaced." "So can cooks," May shot back, then softened. "Your eyes the sand." He was rubbing at them, making it worse. She caught his hands. "Don't. You'll scratch the corneas. Ridge, fetch clean water and cloth." She led Eli to the porch, made him sit, and began the delicate process of washing sand from his eyes. He sat still under her ministrations, tension radiating from his body. "I'm fine," he said. "Hush, let me work." His eyes were bloodshot, the left one especially bad. May worked with gentle patience, aware of how close they were, how intimate this caretaking felt. When she finally stepped back, Eli caught her wrist. "That was brave. What you did, foolish but brave." "I am learning those often go together out here." His thumb traced a small circle on her wrist before he let go. "Thank you." That night, exhaustion should have brought easy sleep, but May found herself standing at her window, watching lightning flicker on the horizon. Another storm, but distant. In its flashes, she saw a rider approaching solo, moving with purpose. She grabbed the shotgun Eli had taught her to use and stepped onto the porch. But as the rider drew closer, she recognized the hulking shape of Josiah Briggs, who ran the neighboring ranch. "Easy, miss," he called out. "Come in peace. Need to speak with Hart." Eli emerged from the shadows where he'd been standing guard. Josiah, bit late for visiting. Bit late for what happened to my hay barn, too. The big man dismounted, his face grim. Burned to the ground this afternoon. Lost half my winter feed. Lightning. That's what Draper's saying. Funny thing, though fire started in 3 places at once. Josiah spat tobacco juice. Even funnier. He showed up right quick after, saying how sorry he was. How maybe if I'd joined the League, they could have helped protect against such accidents. May's hands tightened on the shotgun. They're escalating? That they are, Miss. Question is, what do we do about it? Eli was quiet for a long moment. Then, coffee's hot. Come in and let's talk. They sat around the kitchen table, 3 people pushed toward alliance by shared threat. Josiah was everything Eli wasn't loud. Gregarious, with hands like hams and a laugh that shook windows. But his eyes were shrewd as he laid out what he knew. It's not just us. Every independent ranch in the valley's been hit somehow. Fences cut, water diverted, stock missing. All with explanations that sound reasonable if you don't look close. They want us to break, Eli said. Give up and sell cheap. Or fight back stupid and give them excuse to bring the law down proper. Josiah's meaty fist hit the table. What we need is documentation, legal-like, something that can't be ignored. May stood abruptly. I'll be right back. She returned with papers, her letters to the newspapers, but also something new. A ledger where she'd been recording every incident, every threat, every suspicious circumstance. Dates, times, witnesses. Been keeping track, she said simply. Josiah whistled low. Lady's got more brains than both of us combined. Heart. Tell me something I don't know. Eli studied the ledger. This is good. May. Real good. But we need more. We need evidence that can't be disputed, May finished. Which is why I'm going to the county courthouse tomorrow. Both men started to object, but she raised a hand. Not for my deed, not yet, but all land records are public. Water rights, claim boundaries, league holdings. If they're forcing people out to consolidate, there'll be a pattern in the paperwork. Draper will be watching for you, Eli warned. Then I'll need a distraction. May smiled. Josiah, how do you feel about having a very public argument with the deputy about your barn, say, right around 10 tomorrow morning? The big man's grin was wolfish. Be my pleasure. They planned it carefully. Ridge would create another distraction by reporting found horses at the livery, the 2 they'd lost in the storm, keeping multiple deputies busy with paperwork. Meanwhile, May would slip into the courthouse through the side entrance Widow Joe used when visiting her friend who cleaned there. It's risky, Eli said after Josiah left. Everything's risky now. May began banking the stove. But hiding won't make us safer. They burned Josiah's barn in daylight. How long before they come for yours? She heard him stand, felt him approach. When she turned, he was closer than expected, close enough to see the worry lines etched deep. I have lost enough people, he said quietly. I won't lose you too. You won't. She met his eyes steadily. I'm tougher than I look. I know. That's what scares me. For a moment, they stood suspended in possibility. Then Eli stepped back, the moment broken. Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. But rest wouldn't come. May found herself at the kitchen table, studying her father's few remaining papers by lamplight. There in his careful script, a note she'd overlooked before. Water agreement witnessed by Samuel Hart and John Atza, autumn 1874. John Atza, not an Irish name or American. Could it be? She'd seen Ridge slip something into the barn wall, once a leather pouch hidden behind a loose board. She'd respected his privacy then. But now... The barn was dark, horses shuffling sleepily as she crept past. The board came free easily, revealing not just one pouch, but several. Letters in a woman's hand. Ridge's mother, and at the bottom, an older document on deerskin, marked with symbols she couldn't read but recognized as native writing. My great-uncle's mark. May spun to find Ridge watching her. No anger in his young face, just sadness. "I'm sorry," she began. "Don't be. Been wondering when someone would ask about the old agreements." He took the deerskin carefully. "Uncle John Atza in your tongue, he was a peace chief, believed in working with settlers. Your father was one of the few who honored that. This mark, is it about water rights? Water, hunting, passage. All the things that got forgotten when paper law replaced spoken word." Ridge traced the symbols. "My mother kept this to remember. Now I keep it to remember her." "Ridge." May chose her words carefully. "What if paper law could honor spoken word? What if we could make them recognize what came before?" The boy's eyes sharpened. "The elders say the old agreements died with the old ways." "Maybe, or maybe they're just sleeping, waiting for someone to wake them up." They stood in the barn, woman and boy, holding history between them. Outside, a screech owl called harbinger of change. According to frontier superstition, May preferred to think of it as opportunity. "Would your great-uncle's people talk to me?" she asked. Ridge was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "There's a grandmother Atza's daughter. She remembers, but she doesn't trust easy." "I'm not asking for easy, just for a chance." "I'll think on it." He tucked the deerskin away. "Best get inside. Storm's coming back." He was right. As May hurried across the yard, the first fat raindrops began to fall. But for once, she welcomed the storm. Rain would settle the dust, heal the scarred land, and maybe, just maybe, wash clean the path to justice. Inside, she found Eli still awake, cleaning his rifle by lamplight. "Couldn't sleep either?" she asked. "Storms make me restless." He glanced at her muddy boots, but didn't comment. "May, tomorrow. If something goes wrong..." "It won't." "But if it does, then we deal with it. Together." She sat across from him, watching his hands move over the weapon with practiced ease. "Can I ask you something about Martha?" His hands stilled. "What about her? Did she know about the risks?" A long pause. Then, "Yes, she knew. Said life was risk, and she'd rather live it full than safe." His voice roughened. "I thought I could protect her anyway." "You can't protect people from their own choices, Eli. You can only honor them by making brave choices yourself." He looked at her then. Really looked. And May felt the weight of all they weren't saying. But some truths needed time to ripen, like fruit on the vine. For now, understanding was enough. "Get some sleep," he said finally. "Tomorrow we shake the tree and see what falls." May rose, paused at her door. "Whatever falls, we'll gather it together." The storm intensified as she lay in bed, but May felt strangely calm. Tomorrow would bring danger, yes, but also possibility. In her mind, she saw the pieces gathering: Josiah's anger, Ridge's heritage, the elders' memories, her own determination. Separately, they were vulnerable. Together. Thunder crashed overhead, and in its echo, she heard promise. The land was speaking. Time to listen. # Part 4, Night Without Moon. The moonless night wrapped Heartspur in velvet darkness. May woke to the sound of horses whinnying, not their normal restless sounds, but sharp cries of alarm. She grabbed her shawl and the loaded Colt from her bedside table, moving to the window. 6 figures moved through the yard like shadows, their face hidden by bandanas. They worked with practiced efficiency, one group heading for the water trough, another toward the salt lick the cattle favored. May's blood ran cold. She'd seen her father doctor a poisoned well once, the memory of dead cattle, bloated and stinking in the Nebraska sun, flashed through her mind. She slipped out her door and found Eli already pressed against the kitchen wall, rifle in hand. His eyes met hers, and he mouthed silently, "Get Ridge." But Ridge was already there, materializing from the darkness like smoke. The boy held a whistle, a wooden thing he'd carved himself. At Eli's nod, he raised it to his lips and blew 3 sharp blasts that pierced the night. The intruders froze. May stepped onto the porch and fired into the air, the Colt's report cracking like thunder. "Next one goes into somebody," she shouted. "Now get off our land." For a moment, nobody moved. Then one of the masked men laughed a sound she recognized. Draper's man, Cole Hutchins. "Little lady's got bark," he called out. "Let's see about bite." They rushed forward, but Eli was ready. His rifle spoke twice, sending dirt spraying at their feet. More importantly, the whistle had done its work. The horses in the corral, trained by Ridge to respond, came thundering through the broken gate the boy had quietly opened. 20 head of horseflesh stampeding through the yard scattered the intruders like leaves. "The well!" May shouted, seeing one figure lingering by the water trough. She ran, skirts flying, and caught him pouring something from a bottle. Without thinking, she brought the Colt's butt down on his wrist. The bottle fell, shattering on the stones, its contents hissing as it ate into the ground. The man backhanded her, sending May sprawling. Stars exploded across her vision, but she kept her grip on the gun. When he loomed over her, she pointed it steady at his chest. "Try it," she gasped. "Please." He backed away, hands raised, then turned and ran. Around the yard, the other intruders were fleeing too, spooked by the horses and Eli's accurate shooting. Within minutes, only the sound of hoofbeats fading into darkness remained. Eli helped May to her feet, his hands gentle as he checked her face. "You're bleeding." "I'm fine." But she swayed, and he caught her. "Ridge, check the animals. Don't let them drink until we test everything." His voice was steady, but May felt the tremor in his hands. "Bastards poisoned the salt." They worked through the night. May mixed charcoal and molasses, an old remedy her father had taught her, while Eli and Ridge hauled fresh water from the creek. Every trough was emptied, scrubbed, refilled. The contaminated salt lick was dug up and buried far from anywhere animals might find it. Dawn found them exhausted and filthy, but the livestock was safe. Josiah arrived as the sun cleared the mountains, bringing 2 of his hands. "Heard shooting," he said, taking in their haggard faces. "Figured you might need help." "League paid us a visit," Eli explained tersely. "Tried to poison the stock." Josiah's face darkened. "That's attempted murder, far as I'm concerned. Animals drink that, then people eat the meat." "They're getting desperate," May said. She'd washed the blood from her face, but her cheek was purple with bruising. "Question is, why now?" The answer came with the morning mail. Ridge had ridden to town for supplies and returned with a letter that made Eli go very still. "What is it?" May asked. He handed her the paper. Official letterhead, lots of legal language. But the meaning was clear. Hart Spur was being sued for illegal water usage. They had 30 days to cease operations or prove their right to Little Copper Creek's flow. "They can't do this," May breathed. "They can and they are." Eli's jaw was tight. "Without your father's deed, I can't prove anything. My family's usage was verbal agreement, handshake deals. Nothing that holds up in Crowley's court." May stood abruptly. "Then it's time to stop playing by their rules." She went to her room and returned with paper and ink. "Josiah, I need you to carry a message to Widow Joe. Tell her to expect packages for forwarding. Ridge, can you reach your great-uncle's daughter, the grandmother you mentioned?" "Maybe. Why?" "Because we're going to need her testimony. And Eli." She met his eyes. "I need you to trust me." "May, what are you planning?" Instead of answering, she began to write. 3 letters, each one careful and precise. The first to the Denver Post, detailing the night's attack with the names, dates, and the chemical smell of the poison. The second to the territorial governor's office, requesting investigation into courthouse corruption. The third to a name that made Eli start, Margaret Holcomb, the federal judge in Cheyenne known for her strict interpretation of property law and her sympathy for homesteaders. Judge Holcomb's court is 2 days' ride, Eli said slowly. Then we'd better start packing witness statements. May sealed the first letter. Widow Joe has connections to get these posted from different towns. Harder to intercept that way. They've got Ridge, Josiah said quietly. Everyone turned. The boy's horse stood in the yard, but the saddle was empty. A piece of paper was tucked under the saddle horn. Eli read it, his face going stone hard. Trade the ranch deed for the boy. Midnight, Skeleton Rock, come alone. The kitchen went silent. May felt the world tilt, then steady. This was her fault. She'd pushed too hard, moved too fast, and now Ridge would pay the price. No, her voice came out stronger than she felt. We're not trading anything. May, listen to me. She gripped the table edge. They took him in daylight. People saw, in town, on the road. Kidnapping a child, that's federal crime, not local law. That's beyond even Morrison's protection. You want to gamble with Ridge's life? Eli's voice was dangerous. I want to save him and the ranch. She turned to Josiah. How many men can you gather quietly? Maybe a dozen. Good men who've had enough. Do it! Have them ready by dark. She looked at Eli. You'll go to Skeleton Rock, make the meeting, but you won't be alone. They spent the day preparing. May rode to town openly, bruised face visible to all, and filed a kidnapping report with the federal marshal's office via telegraph. The operator, Thomas Welch, had lost his own ranch to the League. He sent the message priority, his mouth grim. While there, May made another stop. The newspaper office was a cramped space smelling of ink and ambition. The editor, a young woman named Lena Birch who'd come west for adventure, listened to May's story with growing excitement. I've been tracking the League's activities for months, Lena said, pulling out files. But I needed someone willing to go on record. I'll do better than that. May handed over copies of her documentation. I'll give you exclusive access to whatever happens tonight. That could be dangerous. So is letting them operate in darkness. Bring your photographer if you have one. Back at the ranch, she found an unexpected ally. Sarah Atza Ridge's great-uncle's daughter had come on her own. She was ancient, face mapped with wrinkles, but her eyes were sharp as flint. Boy talks about you, she said in careful English. Says you seek justice, not just victory. I seek both, May admitted. Will you help? Sarah studied her for a long moment. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out something that made May's heart race, a treaty document, yellow with age, signed by the territorial governor and bearing several tribal marks. Little Copper Creek, Sarah said, pointing to a hand-drawn map. Sacred water, healing water. Treaty says shared use, eternal time. Your law should honor this. It should, May agreed, thinking fast. Sarah, would you be willing to tell this story to a federal judge? The old woman smiled. Been waiting 60 years for someone to ask. Night fell like a curtain. Eli prepared to leave, strapping on his guns with methodical care. May caught his arm as he headed for the door. Bring him home, she whispered. I will. He cupped her bruised cheek gently. Whatever it costs. No, she covered his hand with hers. We do this smart. Trust the plan. For a moment, they stood frozen, everything unsaid hanging between them. Then Eli pulled her close, pressing his lips to her forehead, a blessing, a promise. If something goes wrong, it won't, but she held him tighter. It won't. He left, and May counted to 100 before following. Josiah's men were already in position, hidden among the rocks surrounding Skeleton Rock. Lena Birch and her photographer crouched behind a boulder, camera ready. The trap was set. Skeleton Rock loomed against the stars, a twisted spire of stone that did indeed look like bones reaching skyward. May bellied down beside Josiah, watching through field glasses as Eli approached on horseback. Draper emerged from the shadows, Ridge bound and gagged beside him. 4 other men flanked them, rifles visible. "Hart," Draper called. "You bring the deed." "Let me see the boy safe first." Draper shoved Ridge forward, even from a distance. May could see the boy was trying to signal something with his bound hands. Then she understood more men, hidden in the rocks above. "Now," she hissed. Josiah's men opened fire not to kill, but to pin down. Shots rang out, sparking off stone, driving Draper's men to cover. In the confusion, Eli spurred his horse forward, leaning down to grab Ridge and swing him up into the saddle. But Draper was ready. His shot took Eli's horse in the shoulder, sending both riders tumbling. May was running before she realized it, Colt in hand. "Stop!" she screamed, firing at Draper's feet. "Federal marshals are on their way. Every move you make is being photographed." The flash of Lena's camera punctuated her words like lightning. Draper spun, his face a mask of rage in the brief illumination. He raised his gun toward May. The shot was impossibly loud in the night. But it wasn't Draper who fired. Eli, blood streaming from a gash on his forehead, had drawn and shot the gun from Draper's hand. The deputy screamed, clutching his bleeding fingers. "Nobody else has to bleed tonight," Eli said, steady despite his injury. "Take your men and go." For a moment, violence teetered on a knife's edge. Then more riders appeared, not federal marshals yet, but townspeople. Word had spread, the banker, the minister, even some of Morrison's own court staff. Witnesses. Too many to silence. Draper cradled his maimed hand. "This isn't over." "No," May agreed, helping Ridge cut his bonds. "It's just beginning, and every bit of it will be in tomorrow's paper." They retreated, carrying their wounded, leaving behind only blood and the echo of threats. May knelt beside Eli, pressing her shawl to his bleeding head. "Stupid man," she muttered. "I said trust the plan." "I did." He caught her hand. Plan worked perfect. Ridge hugged them both, shaking but safe. Around them, their allies gathered ranchers, townspeople, even Sarah Atza and some of her family who'd come to witness. "Boy says you fight for justice." Sarah said to the crowd, "Tonight I see, tomorrow. We speak truth to your federal judge. All of us." Lena was scribbling furiously, her photographer capturing everything. "This will be front page from here to Washington," she promised. "The League's days are numbered." They made a strange procession back to Hart's spur-wounded warriors and determined witnesses, led by an Irish immigrant's daughter who'd learned that sometimes. The best way to fight was to refuse to fight alone. At the ranch, May cleaned Eli's wound by lamplight while he told her what Ridge had signaled. "Smart boy caught them bragging. Hutchins let slip that Crowley's hired guns from Kansas, coming in on tomorrow's train." "Then we'd better be ready." May tied off the bandage, her fingers lingering against his skin. "How's your head?" "Hard enough." He caught her hand again. "May, tonight, when Draper pointed that gun at you." "I know." She squeezed his fingers. "I know." Outside, their friends made camp in the yard, a protective circle against the darkness. Tomorrow would bring new battles, but tonight, they'd won something precious, proof that standing together made them stronger than fear. Ridge appeared in the doorway. "Miss May Grandmother Atza wants to know if you'll take morning tea with her. She has stories about the water treaty you should hear." May smiled, exhaustion and hope warring in her chest. "Tell her I'd be honored." As the boy left, Eli pulled her down beside him on the bench. "You know this changes everything. Crowley won't just roll over." "I'm counting on it." May rested her head on his shoulder, allowing herself this moment of closeness. "Cornered animals make mistakes, and we'll be watching." The night wind carried the sound of voices from the yard, people planning, hoping, daring to believe that justice might prevail. May closed her eyes and listened to Eli's heartbeat, steady and strong beneath her ear. Tomorrow, the war would escalate. But tonight, they'd proven something important: the League could bleed. and what could bleed could be beaten. # Part 5. I Want You So Bad. The morning of the confrontation dawned cold and crystal clear. May stood at the kitchen window, watching the sun paint the mountains gold while her hands mechanically kneaded bread. In 12 hours, they would face Morrison's court. Everything they'd built toward would be tested. "You're going to work a hole in that dough," Eli said from behind her. She hadn't heard him enter. The man moved like a ghost when he chose. The bandage on his forehead had been changed, the wound healing clean, but it was the look in his eyes that made her breath catch. Resolution mixed with something else, something that had been building between them since that first day at the stage depot. "Better than working a hole in my stomach with worry," she replied, but her voice came out breathless. May, just her name, but weighted with everything they hadn't said. "We need to talk about tomorrow." "No," she turned to face him, flour-dusted hands pressed to her apron. "We need to prepare for tomorrow. Talking about it," she shook her head. "Talking makes it real that we might lose." "We might." He stepped closer, close enough that she could smell the leather and soap scent of him. "That's why." "Don't!" The word came out sharp. "Don't you dare say goodbye to me! Eli Hart, don't you dare act like this is an ending!" "I'm not saying goodbye." His hand rose to cup her cheek, thumb brushing the fading bruise Draper had left. "I'm trying to say something else entirely." The kitchen door banged open. Ridge burst in, then skidded to a stop, taking in their positions. "Oh, Grandmother Atsa needs to see you. Miss May says it's important." May stepped back, heart hammering. "Tell her I'll be right there." Ridge fled. Eli's hand dropped to his side. The moment shattered like thin ice, but his eyes held a promise later. Sarah Atsa waited on the porch, wrapped in a blanket despite the warming sun. Beside her sat another elder, a man whose face bore the same proud bones as Ridge's. "My brother," Sarah said simply. "Marcus Atsa, he has something for your fight." Marcus studied May with eyes that seemed to see through time itself. Then he reached into a leather pouch and withdrew a photograph cracked and yellow, but clear enough. It showed a group of men standing by Little Copper Creek. May recognized her father instantly, young and proud. Beside him stood Samuel Hart, Eli's father, and between them, hands clasped in treaty, stood a native man in ceremonial dress. "Our uncle," Marcus said, "the day they made the water agreement. See there?" He pointed to the background. "That rock formation still there today. Proof this picture was taken at Little Copper Creek. And here." He produced a second item, a surveyor's journal. Official territorial seal intact. The government surveyor who witnessed it wrote it all down. How the water was to be shared, your father, the Harts, and our people. Equal rights, eternal time. May's hands trembled as she took the journal. "This changes everything. With this, we can prove the League has no claim," Sarah finished. "That their paper came after and means nothing." "Why didn't you show this before?" Marcus's smile was bitter. Who would listen but now, with federal judge coming, with newspapers watching? Now maybe words written down carry weight. May hugged the journal to her chest. "They'll carry weight. I promise you that." The rest of the day flew by in preparation. Lena Birch arrived with her photographer and a telegram that made May's heart soar. The Denver Post would run their story simultaneous with the hearing. Public pressure from beyond the valley. Josiah brought news of his own. Crowley's guns arrived on the morning train. Dozen hard men, the kind that solve problems with lead. They're holed up at the Cattlemen's Club. "Let them come," Eli said grimly. He was cleaning rifles with Ridge, teaching the boy the methodical care that might save his life. "We've got the law on our side now. Law's only as good as those willing to enforce it," Josiah warned. As afternoon shadows lengthened, May found herself alone with Widow Joe in the kitchen. The older woman had brought food for the gathering crowd. It seemed half the valley's independent ranchers had come to make their stand. "You've lit a fire, girl," Joe said, slicing bread with efficient strokes. Question is whether it'll warm us or burn us all. Either's better than freezing slowly. May arranged cold beef on platters, needing the familiar work to steady her nerves. Joe, can I ask you something about Martha? Joe's hand stilled. What about her? Was Eli different before? Lighter, Joe said after a moment. Quicker to laugh. Martha brought that out in him. She was sunshine in a dress. That girl, when she died. Joe shrugged. He blamed himself, pulled inside like a turtle in its shell. Until you. I'm not trying to replace. Course you're not. You're nothing like her. And that's what he needs. Joe resumed slicing. Martha would have bent before the League. Tried to make peace. You stand straight and dare them to push. He needs that steel beside him. Evening painted the ranch in shades of purple and gold. May found herself on the porch, watching their allies make camp in the yard. Tomorrow felt both too close and too far away. Reconsidering, Eli joined her, carrying 2 cups of coffee. Never. She accepted the cup gratefully. Just thinking about all the ways this could go wrong. Then, stop. He set his cup aside and took hers, placing it on the rail. Dance with me. What, here now? Right here, right now. He held out his hand. Can't think of a better time. There was no music save the wind in the cottonwoods, no floor but rough porch boards. But May placed her hand in his and let him draw her close. They swayed together, her head finding its natural place against his shoulder. I should have done this weeks ago, he murmured into her hair. Should have told you. Tell me now. He pulled back to meet her eyes. What she saw there stole her breath desire. Yes, but also trust, partnership, and something deeper than both. May Callahan, he said softly. Somewhere between you fixing my water pump and pointing a gun at Draper, I fell completely, irrevocably in love with you. The words hung between them like stars. May's heart hammered against her ribs. Eli, I know tomorrow's uncertain. I know we might lose everything, but I couldn't face it without telling you that you've become my everything. She pulled his head down and kissed him. Not gentle, not careful a kiss that poured out weeks of tension, fear, hope, and hunger. He responded instantly, crushing her against him, one hand tangling in her hair while the other splayed across her back. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, May felt wild, reckless with truth. I want you so bad, she whispered against his lips. So bad it scares me. May! Her name was a groan. He pressed his forehead to hers, hands trembling where they held her. You have no idea what you do to me. Show me! He went very still. Then, without a word, he took her hand and led her inside. Not to her small room off the kitchen, but upstairs to his, a place she'd never been. The room was sparse but clean, dominated by a bed covered in a quilt his mother had made. May stood in the doorway, suddenly uncertain. This was a line that, once crossed, couldn't be uncrossed. Tomorrow could bring disaster, separation, even death. Was she really going to? We don't have to, Eli said quietly. I'd be content just to hold you. That decided her. Life was risk. Martha had known that, and May would rather risk everything than live safe and small. She entered the room and closed the door behind her. I'm not looking for contentment. He crossed to her in 2 strides, cupping her face in his work-roughened hands. What are you looking for? You, she breathed. Just you. This kiss was different, slower, deeper, a promise made physical. His hands moved to her hair, pulling pins free until it tumbled around her shoulders. She worked at his shirt buttons, needing to feel skin under her palms. Darlin, I'm yours, he whispered as his fingers traced the line of her throat, writing promises on her skin. Each touch was fire, each caress a claim that went both ways. Been yours since you stood up to Draper that first day. The lamp threw golden light across the bed as clothing fell away, modesty surrendering to need. May had known cold and hunger, fear and loss. But this Eli's hands mapping her body like territory he intended to cherish, his lips following paths that made her gasp this was new country entirely. "Tell me if," he started. "Don't stop," she interrupted. "Please, Eli, make me forget tomorrow exists." He obliged, and the world narrowed to sensation, the slide of skin against skin, the catch of breath, the sweet tension building like a storm. His hands were gentle but sure, reading her responses like a map, learning what made her arch and sigh. When he rose above her, eyes asking one last question, she drew him down. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes to all of it." The joining was everything and nothing like she'd imagined, a sharp sweetness that gave way to something deeper. They moved together, finding rhythm like dancers who'd always known the steps. The lamplight painted their shadows on the wall, two becoming one in ancient choreography. "May," he breathed against her throat. "My May." She was beyond words, beyond thought. There was only feeling the build and crest and shatter of pleasure that left her crying out against his shoulder. He followed her over, her name a prayer on his lips. After, they lay tangled together, hearts gradually slowing. Eli traced lazy patterns on her bare shoulder while May listened to his breathing. "No regrets?" he asked quietly. "None?" She turned to meet his eyes. "Whatever happens tomorrow." "Tomorrow we fight," he interrupted. "Together, but tonight." He rolled her beneath him again, eyes dark with renewed hunger. "Tonight is ours." Much later, May woke to find the room dark. The lamp burned out. Eli slept beside her, one arm heavy across her waist. Through the window, she could see the first pale hint of dawn. Moving carefully, she slipped from bed and found her scattered clothing. Her body ached pleasantly, marked by passion in ways that made her blush. But stronger than embarrassment was determination. They'd crossed every line tonight. Now she'd fight to protect what they'd claimed. "Come back to bed," Eli murmured, awake after all. "Dawn's coming. People will talk." "Let them." But he sat up, sheet pooling at his waist. "May, after we win today, and we will win, I want to do this proper. Court you formal. Marry you legal. Make it clear to everyone that you're mine and I'm yours." She paused in pulling on her stockings. "That sounds like a proposal, Mr. Hart." "It is." He rose and crossed to her, unconcerned with his state of undress. "Answer me after the hearing, but know I'm asking." She kissed him soft and sweet. After the hearing. The sun was properly up by the time May made it to the kitchen, hair hastily repinned, dress straight but wrinkled. Ridge was already there, making coffee with the competence she'd taught him. "Morning, Miss May," he said, not quite meeting her eyes. "Mister, Hart asked me to tell you he's checking the horses." Heat flooded her cheeks, but she kept her voice steady. "Thank you, Ridge." Sarah Atza appeared in the doorway, her ancient face creased in what might have been a smile. "Good morning brings clear eyes and strong hearts," she said, both needed for the fight ahead. The yard filled rapidly as people gathered for the ride to town. May packed the evidence carefully. The journal, the photograph, her father's notes, the treaty document, each piece a weapon against the League's lies. Eli reappeared, dressed in his best shirt, guns polished and visible. He moved with new purpose, and when his eyes found May across the yard, the look in them made her shiver with memory. "Ready," Josiah called out. "Judge will be taking the bench in 2 hours." They formed a convoy, ranchers, townspeople, native families, even some miners from the hills who'd heard about the fight. Lena Birch rode alongside, scribbling notes as her photographer captured the scene. As they crested the hill overlooking Thornbrush, Eli maneuvered his horse next to May's. "Whatever happens," he said low, "I love you." "I love you too," she replied. meaning it with every fiber. Now let's go win this war. The town below bristled with activity. Crowley's hired guns lined the street like carrion birds. But May felt no fear. She'd been forged in loss, tempered by struggle. And last night she'd been transformed by love. Let them come. She had truth on her side, allies at her back, and Eli beside her. The League had controlled this valley through fear and force. Time to show them what happened when love and justice joined forces. The courthouse loomed ahead, and with it, their destiny. Part 6, High Noon Trial. The courthouse square of Thornbrush had never seen such a crowd. By 11:30, every hitching post was taken, every window filled with faces. May stood on the courthouse steps, watching the human tide flow in ranchers still dusty from morning chores, shopkeepers who'd closed their stores, women who normally wouldn't venture into such masculine territory but came anyway, children on shoulders to see over the crowd. Bigger audience than a hanging. Widow Joe observed, adjusting her best hat, the one with the ostrich feather she saved for funerals and fights. Judge Morrison had been forced to move the proceedings outside. A makeshift platform had been erected, his bench nothing more than a table borrowed from the hotel. He sat sweating despite the cool air, eyes darting between the crowd and Silas Crowley, who lounged in the front row like a spider in his web. "All rise," the bailiff called, though most were already standing. Morrison banged his gavel with less authority than usual. "This hearing will address water rights pertaining to Little Copper Creek. The Cattlemen's League has filed claim." "Your Honor," May stepped forward, her voice carrying clear across the square. "I request permission to present evidence relevant to these proceedings." "Young woman, you have no standing." "I am May Callahan, daughter of Patrick Callahan, whose water deed was illegally confiscated by Deputy Draper." She held up the surveyor's journal. "I have proof that predates any league claim." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Crowley half rose from his chair, his face darkening. "Your Honor, this is highly irregular." "So is poisoning wells and burning barns," someone called from the crowd. Nervous laughter followed. Morrison's gavel cracked. "Order, Miss Callahan. This is not how." "Then how?" May climbed onto the platform, uninvited. Behind her, she felt Eli and the others move closer. A wall of support. "In your chambers, where no one can witness behind closed doors, where truth gets traded for silver." "How dare you?" "I dare because I must." May opened the journal, hands steady though her heart raced. "This is the official territorial survey from 1874. It clearly states that water rights to Little Copper Creek were granted jointly to Patrick Callahan, Samuel Hart, and the Shoshone people represented by Chief John Atza." She held the book high, letting the crowd see the official seal. "Equal rights, eternal time, witnessed by federal authority." "Let me see that," Morrison demanded. May hesitated, then felt Sarah Atza's weathered hand on her arm. "Give it," the old woman said. "Let him try to deny what is written." As Morrison examined the journal, his face paling with each page, May continued, "Furthermore, I present this photograph taken at the signing, showing all parties at Little Copper Creek itself. The rock formation in the background still stands today, proving location." Lena Birch pushed forward. "Your Honor, as a member of the press, I'd like to examine this evidence for my readers." "And I," called out another voice, the telegraph operator, "got folks in Denver mighty interested in how this plays out." Morrison looked trapped. His eyes sought Crowley, but the league chairman was no longer lounging. He stood rigid, jaw clenched. These documents could be forged. Morrison tried. That's when Marcus Atza stepped forward, dignified in traditional dress. "Then I will speak what needs no paper. I was there, a young man. When my uncle made this agreement, I watched them shake hands by sacred water. Does this court say my memory lies?" "The testimony of Indians," Crowley began, "has been recognized by federal law since the Treaty of Fort Laramie." A new voice interrupted. Everyone turned as a woman in severe black stepped from the crowd. Margaret Holcomb, Federal Circuit Judge. I received some very interesting telegrams about this case. Morrison went white as his collar. Judge Holcomb, this is a local matter. Violation of federal water treaties is very much my jurisdiction. She mounted the platform with calm authority. As is kidnapping, attempted poisoning of livestock, and conspiracy to defraud. Shall I continue? The square erupted. People pressed closer, voices rising. Crowley's hired guns shifted nervously, hands hovering near their weapons. But the crowd's mood was ugly. Any violence would spark a riot. Order! Morrison banged his gavel frantically. This hearing is postponed. This hearing continues. Judge Holcomb corrected. You may sit as courtesy to your position, Judge Morrison, but I'll be presiding. Now, Miss Callahan, please continue your presentation. May felt Eli's presence at her back, steady as stone. She drew strength from it. Your Honor, the Cattlemen's League has systematically driven out legitimate claim holders through intimidation and violence. They've corrupted local law enforcement, poisoned water sources, and destroyed property. Lies, Crowley burst out. Your Honor, Judge Holcomb, these are baseless accusations from a hysterical woman who has documentation? May interrupted, producing her ledger. Dates, times, witnesses. Would you like me to read the entry from 3 nights ago when Deputy Draper admitted to poisoning? Let me quote that well to teach Hart a lesson. Draper, his hand still bandaged from Eli's bullet, pushed forward. I never said. In front of witnesses, May continued, who are prepared to testify. Damn right we are. Josiah boomed. Half the crowd voiced agreement. Judge Holcomb raised her hand for silence. Deputy Draper, consider yourself under federal investigation. You will surrender your badge immediately. You can't. I can, and I have. She turned to the crowd. If anyone else has evidence of league crimes, my clerk will take statements after this hearing. A line began forming immediately. Crowley's face had gone from red to purple. This is conspiracy. Hart's behind this. He's turned this woman into his puppet to... Nobody's puppet, May said quietly. Just someone who believes water belongs to those who need it, not those who can steal it. Your Honor. Eli spoke for the first time, stepping beside May. Hart Spur has used Little Copper Creek water for 15 years under the original agreement. We've shared with the Callahans, with the Shoshone, with anyone who asked fair. The League wants to control it all, charge for what should be free. Water rights can be sold, Morrison tried. Not treaty water. Judge Holcomb cut him off. Not water promised to native peoples in perpetuity. Any claim that violates that treaty is null and void. She stood, commanding the platform. I hereby issue an immediate injunction against the Cattlemen's League. All water rights obtained through coercion are suspended pending full investigation. Original claims as documented in territorial records are restored. The crowd exploded in cheers. May saw tears on weathered faces, heard prayers of thanksgiving in 3 languages. Justice, so long denied, tasted sweet as spring water. But Crowley wasn't finished. His hand moved to his coat, not for a gun, but for papers. Your Honor, I demand you examine these documents. Proof that Hart's woman is wanted in Nebraska. Theft charges. She's a criminal. Those charges were dropped, May said calmly, though her heart lurched. As you'd know if you'd checked recent records instead of old rumors. The merchant who accused me admitted he'd lied after my father wouldn't sell him our homestead. She turned to Judge Holcomb. I have the dismissal papers if you'd like to see them. That won't be necessary. The federal judge's eyes were ice as she regarded Crowley. What is necessary is that you understand something. The law is not your tool. Justice is not your property. And this valley is no longer your kingdom. Draper made one last desperate play. In the chaos of celebration, he lunged for May, whether to harm or hostage her unclear, but Eli was ready. His fist connected with Draper's jaw with a crack that echoed across the square. The deputy dropped like a felled tree. "Anyone else?" Eli asked mildly, rubbing his knuckles. The hired guns looked at each other, then at the crowd pressing close, without Crowley's money guaranteed, facing federal investigation. The calculation was easy. They began melting away, heading for horses and the road out of town. "Cowards!" Crowley screamed after them. Then, to Morrison, "Do something." Morrison looked at Judge Holcomb, at the crowd, at the telegraph operator already composing messages. "Mr. Crowley, I hereby find all Cattlemen's League water claims filed after 1874 to be invalid. Court is adjourned." He fled the platform, robes flapping. Crowley stood alone, a king without a kingdom, before stalking away with what dignity remained. The square erupted. May found herself lifted off her feet, Eli's arms around her waist, spinning her in a circle while the crowd cheered. When he set her down, she was crying and laughing simultaneously. "We did it," she gasped. "Eli, we—" He kissed her, right there in front of everyone. Not a gentle kiss either, but one that claimed and celebrated and promised. When they broke apart, the cheers had turned to good-natured whistles. "Marry that girl." "Hart," someone yelled. "Planning on it," Eli shouted back, making May blush to her roots. Sarah Atza approached, moving through the crowd that parted respectfully. She carried something wrapped in deerskin, the original treaty, May realized. The old woman pressed it into May's hands. "You keep this," Sarah said. "You understand its power. Water is life. Life is sharing. You remember." "Always," May promised, tears fresh on her cheeks. Lena Birch appeared, notebook in hand but eyes shining. "Miss Callahan, Mr. Hart, any statement for the record?" May looked at Eli, at Ridge whooping with joy, at their neighbors and allies. "Yes," she said. "Tell them that justice isn't won in a day. It's built one truth at a time, one neighbor helping another. Tell them the West isn't just for the strong, it's for the brave. And sometimes," she squeezed Eli's hand, "sometimes the bravest thing is believing we're stronger together than apart." Beautifully put. Judge Holcomb approached, the crowd quieting. "Miss Callahan, Mr. Hart, I'll need you to testify in the federal case against the League. It won't be easy. Crowley has connections." "We'll be ready," Eli said. "We've got something he doesn't." "What's that?" He looked at May with such love it took her breath. Everything worth fighting for. The celebration continued as the sun reached its zenith. Tables appeared from nowhere, laden with food. Someone brought out a fiddle. Dancing broke out in the square where justice had been served. May found a quiet moment with Widow Joe, who was suspiciously misty-eyed. "You did good, girl. Your parents would be proud." "I hope so." May watched Eli teaching Ridge some complicated step while Sarah Atza clapped along. "I found more than justice here. I found home. And someone to share it with," Joe added slyly. About time that man remembered how to smile. As afternoon wore on, reality began creeping back. There would be consequences. Crowley wouldn't accept defeat easily. The federal case would be long and bitter. But for now, for this golden moment, good had triumphed. May felt arms wrap around her from behind. "Dance with me again," Eli murmured in her ear. Proper this time, with music and witnesses. She turned in his arms. "Remember what you asked this morning?" "Every word." "Then yes." She touched his face. This good man who'd given her shelter and found love. Yes, to all of it. He spun her into the dance, and the crowd cheered again. Above, the sun blessed them all, settler and native, rancher and merchant, all united in this moment of victory. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but today, under the wide Wyoming sky, justice sang as sweet as water over stone. and May Callahan's soon-to-be heart danced in the arms of her future while their community celebrated around them. The water would flow free, the land would be shared, and love, tested by fire and sealed by courage, would build something lasting on the bones of the Old West. In the crowd, a photographer raised his camera. The flash captured it all: joy, triumph, the birth of a new era. But no photograph could capture the feeling of that moment when ordinary people stood together and changed everything. That lived only in memory, passed down like water rights, from one generation to the next, sacred, eternal, free. Part 7, Fire at Willow's Edge. Twilight painted the valley in shades of copper and shadow when the riders came. May spotted them first from the kitchen window, a dark line moving fast across the ridge. Too many to count in the dying light. "Eli!" She grabbed the Winchester from beside the door. Through the yard, she saw Ridge already running from the barn, the warning bell clanging in his fist. Eli emerged from the tool shed, took one look at the approaching riders, and began issuing rapid orders. "Ridge, get to the creek spillway. You remember what we planned?" The boy nodded, fear and determination warring on his young face. "Open the emergency gates if they try to dam it." "Good man. May, send word to E." "Already done." She'd fired 2 shots in the air, their signal to neighboring ranches. "Josiah will see the smoke from their watchfire." The riders thundered into the yard, spreading out in practiced formation. May counted 15, maybe 20 the hired guns from Kansas that Crowley had been promising. Their leader, a scarred man with dead eyes, touched his hat brim mockingly. "Evening, folks. Name's Coleman. Mister, Crowley sends his regards." "Crowley's got no business here," Eli said, standing steady despite being outnumbered 10-1. "Federal judge made that clear. Judges change their minds, especially when they have accidents." Coleman's smile was all teeth, no warmth. "But we're not here for you. Just the water. Boys are building a nice little dam upstream as we speak. Divert that creek proper. Let you all think about how dry you're gonna get." May felt cold fury rise in her chest. They'd prepared for this, spent the days since the trial planning for Crowley's revenge. "You can't dam treaty water. That's federal crime now." "Only if someone's alive to report it," Coleman said mildly. The threat hung in the air like smoke. May's finger found the trigger of the Winchester, but she held steady. Not yet. Ridge needed time to reach the spillway. "Funny thing about dams," Eli said conversationally. "They need solid ground. That spot upstream between the Big Cottonwood and Moses Rock looks solid. But we spent 3 days digging channels underneath, covered them with boards and earth." Coleman's eyes narrowed. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" Eli smiled. "Your boy's probably just about done piling rocks and earth. Heavy work. All that weight on those hidden channels. Well, water finds a way." A distant rumbling reached them, the sound of earth giving way and water running wild. Shouts echoed down the valley. Panicked and angry, Coleman's face darkened. "Clever, but clever won't save you when—" The night erupted. Josiah and 6 other ranchers appeared from prepared positions, rifles trained on the gunmen. From the other direction came an unexpected sight. Sarah Atza led a group of Shoshone men, armed and painted for war. "Interesting odds now," May observed. But Coleman just laughed. "You think this is all, boys? Show them what prepared really means." More riders appeared from behind the barn, the smokehouse. Positions they'd taken while Coleman kept them talking. The yard became a powder keg. 50 armed men facing off in the dying light. That's when they heard it. Hoofbeats like thunder, accompanied by something May hadn't expected. The sharp, clear notes of a bugle playing Boots and Saddles. Federal Marshal Tom Briggs rode into the yard, backed by a full cavalry unit from Fort Laramie. Their uniforms were travel-stained, but their carbines were clean and ready. "Coleman," the marshal said pleasantly. "Heard you were in the area. Still wanted in Kansas for those killings." The gunman's jaw worked. "This ain't Kansas." "No, But interfering with federal water rights, that's my jurisdiction everywhere. Briggs turned to Crowley's other men. Any of you boys want to join him in federal prison? Or would you rather head back where you came from? The arithmetic was simple. Cavalry carbines trumped hired guns, one by one. Crowley's men began backing away, hands carefully visible. "This isn't over," Coleman snarled. "Sure it is," May said, stepping forward. "Your dam's washed out. Your men are leaving. And you," she smiled coldly, "you're under arrest." Coleman went for his gun. 3 things happened simultaneously. Eli shoved May aside. Coleman's pistol cleared leather, and May fired the Winchester from her hip. The shot took Coleman in the shoulder, spinning him around. His gun flew into the dirt. He clutched the wound, staring at May in shock. "You missed," he gasped. "No," May said calmly. "I hit exactly what I aimed for. Your shooting arm, like my husband taught me stopping power without killing." She glanced at Eli. "Though I'm getting ahead of myself on the husband part." "Only by a few days," Eli murmured, making the cavalry troopers grin. Marshal Briggs took Coleman into custody, along with 3 others too stupid to run. The rest scattered into the darkness, their horses' hoofbeats fading like dying thunder. "How did you know?" May asked the marshal. "Got an interesting telegram from a newspaper woman. Lena Birch said there might be trouble tonight. The colonel thought it might be good training for the boys." He winked. "Plus, Judge Holcomb asked real nice." As the cavalry set up camp in the yard protection until dawn, May found herself by the creek with Eli and Ridge. The boy had performed perfectly, opening the spillway gates at just the right moment. The water ran free and clear, unimpeded by Crowley's crude dam. "Look at that," Ridge said wonderingly. In the moonlight, they could see the failed dam's remains, timber and stone scattered like toys. "Water really does find a way. Always has," Sarah Atza said, joining them. Her warriors had melted back into the darkness, but she'd remained. "My people knew fight the river. River wins. Work with river. Everybody drinks." May knelt by the water's edge, cupping the cold flow in her hands. "My father would have loved this moment." "He knows," Sarah said simply. "Water remembers. Every blessing, every sharing, every fight for what's right. All flows downstream to next generation." Eli helped May to her feet. "Speaking of next generation—" "Not in front of the boy," May said, blushing. Ridge groaned dramatically. "I'm 14, not 4. I know you two are sparking." He grinned. "About time, too." They walked back to find the yard transformed into a celebration. Word had spread Crowley's last grasp at power had failed spectacularly. Neighbors arrived with food and drink. Someone built a bonfire. Lena Birch appeared with her photographer and a telegram that made everyone cheer. The Denver paper had picked up the story. "Water wars end in Wyoming. Justice flows free." "One more thing," Eli said, producing something from his pocket. It was the bullet-damaged deed Coleman had been carrying Crowley's forged claim to Little Copper Creek. Eli handed it to May. "Thought you might want to do the honors." May looked at the paper that had caused so much grief. Then, with great ceremony, she fed it to the fire. The crowd cheered as it burned, taking Crowley's lies with it. "Miss Callahan." Marshal Briggs approached. "Judge Holcomb sent this for you." He handed her an official envelope. Inside was her father's original water deed, legally certified and stamped with the federal seal. But more than that, a document granting her full authority as water rights administrator for the valley, pending local election. "She wants you to oversee fair distribution," Briggs explained. "Set up a system that honors the original treaties and serves everyone equal." May stared at the papers. I don't know what to say." "Say yes," Josiah boomed. "Can't think of anyone better." "The woman who fights for justice." Sarah Atza added, "The one who remembers promises." Good choice. May looked at Eli, who smiled. Your decision, but if you're asking my opinion, I think your father would be proud. Yes, May said, voice strong. I accept. The celebration continued past midnight. May found herself dancing with Eli by firelight while their neighbors sang songs of home Irish ballads, mixing with Shoshone chants and cowboy tunes. It was the sound of the New West, diverse and harmonious. Regrets? Eli asked as they swayed together. Only one. She touched his face. That we waited so long to find each other. Worth the wait, he said, and kissed her while their friends hooted approval. As dawn approached, Marshal Briggs prepared to leave with his prisoners. Crowley's fled the territory. He informed them. Won't be back. Too many federal warrants waiting. And Morrison? May asked. Resigned. Town council's appointing a new judge. Someone honest this time. The cavalry rode out with the sunrise. Coleman cursing through his bandages. The threat was ended. The water secure. But May knew the real work was just beginning. I want to build something, she told Eli as they stood watching the sun paint the mountains gold. Not just protect what we have, but make it better. Irrigation cooperatives. Water shares for newcomers. Schools that teach both ways, paper law and traditional knowledge. Ambitious, he said. Going to need help. I know just the people, May said, looking at their friends scattered around the yard, exhausted but victorious. Josiah, snoring by the dying fire. Ridge curled up with his head on Sarah Atza's lap while she hummed old songs. Widow Joe dispensing coffee and wisdom in equal measure. Family, Eli said, understanding. Oh, the kind you choose, May agreed. Lena Birch approached one last time. Notebook ready. Final statement for the morning edition. May thought carefully. Tell them this water is life, and life is meant to be shared. The Callahan Heart Alliance. She glanced at Eli, who nodded. Will ensure Little Copper Creek flows free for all who need it. The West wasn't one with guns or gold. It was one when neighbors learned to trust each other. Beautiful, Lena said. Oh, and congratulations on your engagement. When's the wedding? Saturday, Eli said firmly. I'm not waiting any longer. Saturday, May laughed. That's 3 days. 3 days too many, but Widow Joe insists on time to make a proper cake. As the morning sun warmed the valley, May surveyed their small kingdom. The creek sang over stones. Eternal and free, the mountains stood guard, ancient and patient. And between them, in this harsh and beautiful land, they'd carved out something precious, a place where justice mattered, where different peoples could unite, where love could bloom like wildflowers after rain. Coleman had been wrong. This wasn't over. This was just beginning. Part 8, Season of Plenty. 6 months had passed since the night of fire and water, and the valley had transformed. May stood on the porch of the expanded Hart Ranch house, watching the morning sun dance across irrigation channels that now crisscrossed the land like silver veins. The summer of 1890 had brought abundance none had dared hope for. Mrs. Hart. Ridge came running from the barn, no longer the scrawny boy who'd helped with horses, but filling out into a young man. The Petersons' wagon just crossed the ridge. They're bringing their whole family for the Water Council meeting. May smiled, adjusting the ledger in her arms. As the elected water administrator, she held these monthly gatherings to ensure fair distribution. Tell them to set up by the cottonwoods. Sarah Atza's family is already there. The boy young man, she corrected herself, nodded, and sprinted off. At 15, Ridge had grown into his responsibilities, managing the expanded horse operation while studying both ranching and traditional knowledge with equal dedication. You're going to wear a groove in that porch, Eli said, emerging with 2 cups of coffee. He handed her one, his fingers lingering on hers in a gesture that still made her heart skip after 6 months of marriage. Just watching it all, May said, gesturing to their domain. Where once stood a struggling ranch now spread a thriving operation. New corrals held fine horses bred from their surviving stock. The reconstructed barn rose proud against the sky. Most importantly, the water flowed free and organized, feeding not just their land, but the entire valley through the cooperative system she'd established. "Your father would be proud," Eli said softly. "Our fathers," May corrected. She'd had both Patrick Callahan's and Samuel Hart's names inscribed on the new water wheel that powered their expanded operations. "They dreamed it. We built it." A dust cloud announced more arrivals. Josiah Briggs led a convoy of neighbors, his booming laugh preceding him. Behind came the Yamadas, a Japanese family who'd arrived 2 months prior, and the Kowalskis, Polish immigrants who'd bought the old Morrison place. The water covenant made no distinction of origin, only need and willingness to share. May Lena Birch waved from her own wagon, her photographer beside her. The Denver Post had made her a regular correspondent, and she'd moved to Thornbrush permanently. "Wait until you see today's edition." She handed over a fresh newspaper. The headline made May's throat tight: "Wyoming Water Miracle, How One Valley Became a Model for the West." "They're sending a delegation from Washington," Lena explained. "Want to study your system for federal water policy." "Our system," May emphasized, looking at the gathering crowd. "I just keep the books." "Don't let her fool you," Widow Joe called out, arriving with a wagon full of food for the meeting. "Woman works sunrise to midnight, making sure everyone gets their fair share." As the yard filled with neighbors, May reflected on the changes. The water register she'd created, a thick leather book where every family's usage was recorded, had become almost sacred. Disputes were settled by council vote. New arrivals were welcomed with ceremony, their names added to the covenant. "Time to start," Eli said, squeezing her hand. They gathered under the cottonwoods, over 100 souls from a dozen origins. May stood before them, no longer the desperate woman who'd stepped off a stagecoach, but confident in her purpose. "Friends," she began, her voice carrying clear. "This month brings us new neighbors and new challenges. But first, the water report." She opened the ledger, detailing flow rates, usage, and reserves. The spring melt had been generous, but she preached caution. "Remember, we plan for the dry years and the wet ones." "What about the miners upstream?" called out Tom Garrett, one of the newer ranchers. "Heard they're planning to divert Copper Creek's headwaters." May had heard the same, which is why I've invited someone special today. The crowd parted as an unexpected guest arrived. Judge Margaret Holcomb, now promoted to the Territorial Supreme Court, stepped forward with a rolled document. "Ladies and gentlemen," the judge said, "I bring news from Washington. The Little Copper Creek Covenant has been recognized as federal law. Any attempt to interfere with your water system is now a federal crime, prosecutable in federal court." The cheer that went up could likely be heard in town. May felt Eli's arm around her waist, steady and proud. "Furthermore," Judge Holcomb continued, "Congress is considering legislation based on your model, the Callahan-Hart Water Act. They're calling it." May had to sit down, overwhelmed. Eli took over the meeting, his quiet authority keeping order as neighbors discussed expansions, improvements, and the eternal challenge of fair distribution. Later, as the sun reached its zenith, the gathering transformed into celebration. Tables groaned under the weight of shared food. Sarah Atza's grandchildren played with the Kowalski boys while their parents planned next season's crops. The Yamadas demonstrated an efficient irrigation technique from their homeland, eagerly absorbed by the other farmers. "It's not just about water anymore," Ridge observed, joining May where she rested in the shade. "It's about belonging." "Wise words," May said. "You're growing up well." The young man ducked his head, pleased. "Been thinking about that school idea you mentioned. Maybe I could help teach both kinds of knowledge, like Sarah Atza says." "I think that's wonderful. In fact..." May pulled out an envelope. "This came yesterday. The Territorial Education Board approved our application, funding for a proper schoolhouse with teachers for English, mathematics, and traditional knowledge. Ridge whooped, drawing amused looks. Education had become May's newest crusade, ensuring Valley children learned both the skills needed for the changing world and the wisdom of those who came before. As afternoon wore on, May found herself by the creek with Eli. They'd built a small bench here, their private retreat from the busy world they'd created. "Any regrets?" he asked, echoing his question from their wedding night. May considered. The work was endless. She'd been threatened twice more by League remnants, though nothing serious came of it. The responsibility of ensuring fair water distribution weighed heavy some days, but none, she said firmly. "We built something good here, Eli, something that will outlast us." Speaking of outlasting, he took her hand, placed it on her still flat stomach. "How are you feeling?" May smiled. They'd told no one yet about the new life growing within her, wanting to hold the secret close a bit longer. "Strong, happy, slightly terrified." "You terrified the woman who faced down gunmen and corrupt judges. That was different. This," she leaned into him, "this is creating life in a hard land, making sure they have a better world than we found." "They will," Eli said with quiet certainty. "Look around. May, look what love and justice built." She did look at neighbors becoming family, at water flowing free, at the school rising where the old Morrison place had been, at Sarah Atza teaching young wives about medicinal plants while their husbands learned irrigation from the Yamadas. "One more thing," Eli said, producing a letter. "This came for you." May recognized the handwriting immediately. Her cousin in Ireland, responding to the letter she'd sent months ago. She read quickly, tears starting. "What is it?" "She's coming," May whispered. "My cousin Bridget. Her husband died, and she has nothing left there. She's bringing her 2 children, asking if there's room." "Of course there's room," Eli said immediately. "We'll add to the house. Ridge can help me, and the children will have cousins to play with soon enough." May kissed him, overwhelmed by the fullness of it all. From solitary survival to this, a family growing, a community thriving, a legacy building. As the sun began its descent, painting the mountains in shades of rose and gold, the Water Council meeting officially concluded, but nobody left. Instead, instruments appeared. Music filled the air, fiddles and drums, harmonicas and flutes, the sound of cultures blending into something uniquely theirs. May danced with Eli, then Josiah, then young Ridge, who was surprisingly graceful. She watched the Petersons' daughter shyly approach the eldest Yamada boy, saw Widow Joe teaching the Kowalski women her legendary pie crust technique, witnessed Sarah Atza and Judge Holcomb deep in conversation about preserving traditional law within American justice. "May," Lena called out. "Group photograph everyone by the water wheel." They gathered, over 100 souls, arranged before the wheel that bore both Hart and Callahan names. The photographer fussed with his equipment while people jostled good-naturedly. "Wait!" Ridge ran to fetch something, returning with the original water deed and treaty document. "These should be in the picture." May held one, Sarah Atza the other, standing at the center of their assembled family, as the flash powder exploded, capturing the moment for posterity. May thought about time and water, how both flowed ever forward, carving new channels while honoring the old. Later, as guests departed with promises to meet again soon, May and Eli sat on their porch. The evening star appeared first, followed by its countless sisters. The creek sang its eternal song. "What are you thinking?" Eli asked. "About names," May said, hand resting on her stomach. "If it's a boy, I'd like to call him Patrick Samuel, for our fathers. And if it's a girl," May smiled, "Hope, because that's what she'll be. Hope for the future." "Hope Hart." Eli tested the name. I like it. A coyote called in the distance, answered by another. But the sound no longer meant loneliness to May. It meant wildness preserved alongside civilization, the balance they'd fought to achieve. I have something for you, Eli said, producing a small wrapped package. Inside was a silver locket, delicately engraved with intertwining water lilies. May opened it to find 2 photographs, one of her parents, one of Eli's. So they can see what we built, he explained. May couldn't speak past the lump in her throat. She simply held him, this good man who'd given her shelter and found love, who'd stood beside her against all odds. I love you, she whispered. And I love you, he replied, forever and always, like water to the sea. The ranch settled into evening quiet. In the barn, horses nickered softly. The water wheel turned steadily, marking time in splashes and sighs. And on the porch of the house that love built, May and Eli Hart sat together, guardians of all they'd created. The water flowed free, the land bloomed with promise, and in the heart of the Wyoming Valley, justice and hope ran as deep as the creek that had started it all. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, miners to negotiate with, schools to build, babies to birth, communities to weave ever tighter. But tonight, with her husband's hand in hers and their child growing beneath her heart, May knew they'd face it all together. The West hadn't been won with guns or gold. It had been won with courage, community, and the conviction that water, like justice, belonged to all who thirsted. And in the little Copper Creek Valley, none would thirst again. The stars wheeled overhead, ancient witnesses to the newest chapter in the eternal story of water and will, love and land. And May Callahan Hart, once a desperate woman with nothing but her father's deed, sat surrounded by abundance she'd never dared dream. Home, family, purpose, love. The water sang them all. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Please share in the comments below so we can connect and exchange thoughts about May and Eli's journey. If you enjoyed this Wild West tale of love and justice, please subscribe to my channel Wild West Night. Give this video a like and hit that hype button to help more people discover this story. Your support means the world to me and helps keep these tales of the American frontier alive. Until next time, partners.